Welcome to your Mental Health Matters podcast, a community-minded mental health podcast providing real-life mental health talks supporting parents, educators, and students.
Welcome to your Mental Health Matters. Today we're talking about the impact of technology and screen time. So welcome, Mel and Chantal. How are things going? I'm super excited to talk about this topic today.
Yeah, it's going great. Really good. Nice to be back together. Miss chatting with you all and with you both, and it's been good. How about you, Chantal?
It's been good. It's been busy. Going back to school in January is always a little bit hard. So taking last month off wasn't actually a bad thing. Gave us some time to catch up. But I am super excited to talk about technology and the impact of screen time, because this is something that parents come to me and ask about all the time.
Yes, it's such a hot topic.
Yes, so I'm really excited that we're doing this.
Yeah, well, let's dive right in. And over the last couple of years with COVID and everything, probably screen time has amped up for all of us. So it's an appropriate time to talk about the topic. It's winter, it's freezing cold outside. What else do you do, right?
But play video games or scroll social media. It's just, you do it without even thinking. It's mindless, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that with COVID, we were trapped in our houses, we couldn't really do a lot, kids weren't at school,
Exactly.
So that screen time definitely increased, and then we didn't know how long this was going to happen for. We thought maybe a few weeks to flatten the curve, so we increased screen time for a little bit. But what happened is now we're 2 years in and that screen time is still increased. So I think a lot of what today's topic will be about is understanding our relationship with screen time and understanding that we can't get rid of it.
No, it's part of our everyday lives.
So
every day. So it's more about becoming informed about some of the positive and negatives that come with technology and just being more informed users, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. So in today's episode, we'll cover some background, some research in terms of appropriate screen time usage. We'll look at technology as a tool. So it can be a real positive things. I enjoy connecting with relatives far away.
That's right.
Doing educational games with my children. It really is a tool in the hand of the user. Sometimes it can be great, sometimes it can be more challenging. And we'll talk about some of those challenges that we're seeing around technology as well.
So let's start with the positive.
I agree.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I will have to admit, I know a lot of people have Zoom fatigue, but I am loving the Zoom meetings.
Right?
It has saved so much time in my day.
Yeah.
And I can connect with people all around the world in these different trainings. It's something that we couldn't do before. You had to actually travel, which was super expensive.
Yeah.
So I am loving that part of it, being able to connect with people all around the world and being able to take part in things that I wouldn't normally take part in.
It's
So
nice.
true.
It's a connection. We know it's a connection tool, and we know how great it can be. And I think part of that is everyone needs to connect. And with COVID, we can't connect the way we used to.
Totally.
And we also want our children to be connecting with their friends if they
Yeah.
can't go out and physically be with them.
Yeah.
And how do you tell a parent to tell their child they can't be with their friends?
Totally.
And so internet, social media, all those things can be wonderful for that piece.
Yeah, especially if you're stuck at home. I was just FaceTiming with my daughters and my wife yesterday, and that was pretty awesome. So that's always great. And
Nice.
I love the work side of things, whether it be doing virtual meetings or meet and greets and different things. It's just so convenient versus driving. I love working from home. So thank you, technology. It allows me to work from home.
Yep.
And probably my absolute highlight is doing learning games with my daughters. They just love sitting. I'm sitting in the middle. I've got the iPad, and either of them are on either side doing our learning games in terms of basic reading and math skills.
You're such a teacher.
Yeah.
It's actually a total highlight. I am a teacher at heart, so this is the best game to teach my kids, and they just sit there quietly and love it. And we just had this amazing deja vu moment a couple of days ago where my oldest daughter was showing my youngest daughter how to do some of these games all by themselves, reading her letters. It was just beautiful. I had to take a
Connection
picture.
moment, everything. It's
Andrew,
learning.
look at this. The oldest one's learned, and now she's teaching the younger one. So
That
it's
is
just beautiful.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But don't get me started on Cocomelon and some of those other addicting Netflix shows with this and that. Never want to be negative against any shows, but there's just some shows
Yes.
that developmentally I don't think children can handle too well.
Yeah.
And that's a really important piece. We can be using this for good or bad.
Yeah.
And myself with my kids, as I've always said, that I have teenagers and young adults. We play Rock Band together.
Fun.
Or Super Mario Kart. And it is a connection time because it's
Totally.
something that they really enjoy.
Yeah.
ordinarily, because I can't play any of their shooting game ones. I'm clueless.
Come on, Mel, you can't get into that.
No, I feel myself getting dizzy just watching the big screen, and so no, it doesn't work for me.
I'm used to video games that's just linear, like
Right.
Mario.
Yes.
You know where you're going.
Right.
I like Pac-Man. Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
Have you all tried VR ever?
No, I
I-
won't.
Okay, I've never tried it, but I really want to. It
I
seems
have.
super fun.
I used to volunteer with Big Brothers and Big Sisters,
Wow.
so I would take my little, and it is a surreal feeling.
Yeah.
It's disorienting.
It is. You start on top of a building, and I'm afraid of heights, and it feels very real. So it's nothing I would do on my own, but my little sister loved it, so
So
we
beautiful.
would go.
What a great way to connect with them on their level and something they really enjoy.
Yeah.
Used for good, right? This is a
Exactly.
good way of connecting.
It's so true, and as parents, we have to enter into our children's worlds. So
Yeah.
just saying technology's bad, don't use it, get off your screen time, having kind of a negative perception of it
Yes.
can actually, instead of building bridges, create gaps between our children. So learning how to steward it, moderate it, all of those things is really important.
Mhm.
But seeing that and using that as a tool to enter into your child's world, not for 5 hours, not for a
Yeah.
few days at a time, but
Exactly.
even as one of our colleagues says, who helps produce the show, like 20 minutes, give them
Yep.
20 minutes of destiny,
Yep.
a short kind of segments of those video games,
Yes.
enjoy it with your children, allow them to play it, keeping it at those developmentally appropriate levels, and also something that's recharging, not just eyes glazing over after a whole bunch of hours and stuff.
Exactly.
So everything in moderation.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's right.
So I think two of the main areas I should share with our listeners.
Yeah,
I did
so
just
good.
take a tech addiction certification course, which a lot of the material in here today I kind of pulled from there. But the biggest takeaways is really looking at video games and social media, because those are the two that are really impacting our mental health and
Completely.
our development. And so what is that doing to our brain and to
So
our
true.
body and to our social skills?
Yeah.
Right?
So good. Well, tell us more about that impact on the brain. So I know you've been doing a lot of research, and this is an area you're passionate about there, Chantal.
Yes, so lots of research in here. So one of the main things is thinking about what is actually happening inside the body
Yes.
and the brain when you have a child that's sitting in front of, well, let's use video games.
Yep.
Those first-person shooter games. There's a reason why there's a rating on those games.
Right.
But if you have a kid that's sitting in front of a screen playing a first-person shooter game, the adrenaline that's running through their body,
Exactly.
right? That
You see their heart racing because you see my children are perspiring. They come away from playing the game and they're sweating, and I'm like, oh my goodness, did you just run a marathon? And they're like, playing this really intense game, Mom. I gotta go get back to it. I can't talk right now. Right?
Absolutely. So you think about that. It's called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis.
Right.
So that's just a big long word for fight or flight.
Yeah.
So our fight or flight is actually activated. So that's why you see that sweating, the
Exactly.
dilated pupils, the increased heart rate. Our bodies are actually preparing for actual danger.
Because
Yet-
it doesn't know the difference.
Absolutely, and yet they're stationary. And so a lot of parents will ask me about the explosive emotion and behavior following saying, get off your video games.
Yes.
Well, you have a child that's been sitting there for an hour with their fight or flight
Yep.
amped up,
Amped up.
and now all of a sudden you're confronting them,
Yeah.
and there's an explosion. So we need to really take into account what is happening within our
Totally.
bodies
Yeah.
when we're sitting in front of those screens.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so true.
That's such a big piece of this is I think we want to give kids an outlet. We want them to feel like they know how to, they have some self-control themselves, some autonomy in the games they play and understand that. But if they do not know what's happening within their body and how they're responding to other people,
Yeah.
it's a big thing that we have to give them that self-awareness, and we have to teach them those boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay.
So true. And just even understanding as parents where our children's brain and body are at as we're trying to have a conversation or intervene regarding their games.
Certainly not during or right after, because you know they're going to be in that hypervigilant, right?
Yeah.
There needs to be a negotiation, just like bedtime, just like anything else, right?
Yeah, pre-planning, of course. And I
Pre-planning.
know as you talk about this a lot, Mel, the idea of their brains are offline.
Yeah.
So they might be there physically, but
Yeah.
they're not really in a space to have any type of discussion, negotiation, etc. So
Exactly.
pre-planning,
Yeah.
having those timers to make sure, okay, in 10 minutes we've got to get off our game. So we're only playing, 2 rounds of Fortnite or whatever it is. Talking with your child beforehand, how much video game time do you have? okay, how many rounds or how will you be allotting this time? Maybe actually turning off a couple minutes before the deadline, so that we're not in the middle of a game and just
Right,
going
right,
over.
because that is a valid point.
Yeah.
Because when someone is playing a game and they are asked to leave before they finish, or they finish a level, that causes them to be escalated. So maybe it is a conversation about 3 levels or 30 minutes, whatever comes first, or
Yeah.
some negotiation that way. So if it is a couple of minutes prior to the time that has to be turned off, they don't start a new level and then become explosive because
Yes.
they're in the middle of it.
So true. Well, tell us, Chantel, a bit more about this electronic screen syndrome you were researching.
So very interesting. It's kind of what we were just talking about. Our body is hyped up. It doesn't look like it because we're stationary, but there's a lot going on inside. And so that electronic screen syndrome, it looks a lot like ADHD.
Right.
So the impulsivity, the inattention, the moodiness, and then that aggressive behavior. So looking for some of those signs might be an indication to cut back screen time, to find different activities, or to use screen time in a more educational way than using video games. Because video games, they're fun, let's be honest.
Right.
And I think there was like 96% of teens actually use video games in
Right.
some capacity.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, that's huge.
It is.
And so realizing that we're not going to be able to take that away, but being able to regulate that time. Because if you have a child that's sitting in front of a screen for hours on end, 4 to
right.
6 hours a day
Yes.
playing video games, you're going to get that moodiness and that aggressive behavior. So,
Yeah.
so looking for those signs and those symptoms.
Totally. And content too, right? Cooperative games versus competitive games. Maybe a little bit more just less addictive games or less stressful games as well.
That's
It's very
right.
interesting if you play perhaps some Nintendo Wii and do some cooperative games versus
That's
some
a good
very
point.
intense,
Yes.
first-person shooter video games. They
Right.
could have a different response from your child when that time's over.
Absolutely, not to mention the fact that the game itself, a child may be playing and then a sibling is watching.
Yeah.
So we
Yes.
have to also talk about the fact that the content may be appropriate for the one child, but who else is watching? Who else is listening to that language? Because we know children come into school and they'll bring that language into school. They'll bring that behavior, those mocking or modeling some of the behaviors and actions in the videos, and they'll come to school and they'll act it out in their play.
Totally.
So it is really important to be mindful of that piece, because that's the stuff we can control.
Totally.
And that age-appropriate language. I remember I had kiddos talking about meeting at the club. And I had no idea what that meant.
Right.
Yeah.
But in Grand Theft Auto,
Yep.
Say
there
GTA.
there are some clubs that are inappropriate,
Yes.
Extremely
right?
inappropriate.
But all these kids were talking about meeting at the club after school, and I'm like, what club? Like
Yeah.
book club? Like, no, I had it
Not
wrong.
quite. I mean, that's a whole nother world. Yeah, I'm old, right? So back when I was playing video games, you just played with the computer. But now they're in this world of online games. It's not just the content of the game, but all the other users and the type of language and interactions they're having. So unless you're monitoring kind of on top of your child, unfortunately, there's a lot of diverse populations who use those games, and some of them might be less child-friendly or age-appropriate than others. So it's a scary world out there in terms of video games. So just being mindful and aware of all those details, I think, is key.
And I don't think we're saying that parents are not mindful of this. We're just
Totally.
saying that sometimes we want to respect our children's autonomy in playing
Exactly.
and enjoying their games. However, we may not be aware of all of the other variables that are coming into play. For example, if there's any kind of online communication between somebody who's on the other end.
So true.
Right? Not to mention, is it an age-appropriate online friend? Is it
Yeah.
somebody that's from
Yes.
another community who is, saying they're the same age? And what kind of content are they sharing back and forth to each other? So the child may be on, what's a game that's...
Discord, or you're thinking of a game?
Roadblock?
Roadblocks, thank
Right,
you.
feel
But
that
then,
one.
Yeah.
they are communicating through different things, and all of a sudden it changes the context of the game, and you're getting heightened, and there's bullying happening, because with games, there's also some anonymity that happens,
Yes.
right? And that's a concern.
It can be a scary world, and I think recently, actually, I saw a post on social media that the government of Canada has actually issued like an ad warning people about predators
Right.
in these games. So
Right.
that's a topic all on its own.
It is,
Just getting
right.
back to that developmental piece, I think one piece that I don't want to skip over is younger kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Because think about how much our brain is growing and changing from that year 1 to 5. There's so many changes that are happening, and so much learning happens in that time.
Yeah.
And research has found that kids who spend more than the recommended 1 hour on their screens, on their tablets, actually has an impact on their cognitive learning, on their language, and on their literacy.
Yeah.
So keeping in mind that those are crucial developmental periods, and so being very mindful of what your kiddos are watching in those years, and making sure more so that it's educational in those years, because those are formative years, and that impacts us for the rest of our lives.
So true. I think you said from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, they said 0 to 18 months, screens are kind of only recommended for chatting with relatives. And I think you said 18 to 24, educational games maybe okay with a parent kind of playing along, as I described kind of with my daughters there.
Yep.
And that's kind of the focus. And as they become 2 to 5, of course, hopefully they're still mostly educational, but keeping, I think they said, anything non-educational to about an hour per week.
Yeah.
Kind of less so kind of on the weekdays. And 6 and up at this age, they've recommended, I think, centered around encouraging habits and hobbies that don't involve screens. So having that balance, having some non-educational games perhaps as an option, reward system, etc., but being able to balance those things out. And I think just having that balance, like we said before, moderation is so key when we think of screens. And it's not only for children, it's for teenagers, and it's for adults too.
Oh, yes.
So adults also have to be, I know sometimes with my phone, I'm like, well, it's like, hey, Joel, how long have you been on your phone? And you look at your screen time app,
and
it's
it
like,
tells you, right?
I
How
was
long
just
you've
looking
been
at
on
some
it.
information, and all of a sudden you get lost in the whirlwind of Google.
Exactly. You go down the rabbit hole,
social
right?
media.
So many rabbit holes on the internet.
Yeah, and so I'd like to flip it for a second to recognize or to draw attention to the fact that parents, sometimes we're going, speaking children, 5, I always have the golden ticket, like I said, you may not be able to monitor every single action that your children are having.
Totally.
And if they're in their rooms, you could assume they're doing something else besides being on their phone, being on social media. But the truth is, there's only so much monitoring we can do.
So
we
true.
could put some safety measures on all of their devices to make sure they're not accessing certain material. That is something we can do, and any parent can go on Google and say, how do I put safety security on my child's phone or iPad, which is good. But I just want to say that I know for us to say only 1 hour a week to a parent, and the parent's like, 1 hour in the morning maybe.
Yeah.
You know, that's more realistic for them.
Totally.
If we could have some alternative conversation about what else we can give them as an alternative thing to do with their child.
So true.
Or like you said, change it up. Maybe it's an hour playing this particular game, but then it has to be an educational game, the next one. And maybe there's a break, and maybe there's some connection time, because kids are really missing that physical connection. Yeah. When I'm sitting in a room with a child, my heart reaches the same kind of pace as theirs.
Yeah.
We're making eye contact. We're regulating.
Totally.
We're co-regulating. And when kids are in front of a screen in that hypervigilant state, they have no one that's going to regulate them. Which means in their state, when they're not on their video games, they may be walking around bubbling just under the surface all day and not regulating.
Totally. And things like music. Technology is available, music videos that are age appropriate. That can be really enjoyable and a real positive regulating activity for children.
One.
So many different apps, Go Noodle, etc.
Yep.
And even my daughter, she loves looking at pictures. She must be very sentimental. She's only 3.5. She loves looking at our old pictures.
Oh, your family pictures.
Yeah, she loves it. And like Apple plays, iPads play like a little video time lapses they create.
Yes.
So she loves playing them and watching them.
That's
and that's
beautiful.
more chill tech time,
Yeah.
where it's not super addicting. It's just really enjoyable.
Exactly.
She loves the little music and seeing all of our family pictures in the past year. So it's being creative and working with what's there for your children.
And negotiating with your children. Give them insight. Give them input, because they'll tell you, okay, yes, I really love this game, but yes, I understand now A, B, and C happens.
Yeah.
Negotiate with them about, okay, you know you have 5 hours on Saturday, that's you can do anything you want. What times are that's going to be screen time? And we can kind of have a conversation where both partners are happy, both parents, and child are happy.
Yeah.
It's just a compromise.
And Joel, I love that analogy that you were talking about, the keys to the car.
Right, yeah.
Like, I think this would be a really good time to let parents know that. I know we have a section at the end, but we're already talking about it.
Sure, let's dive in. So we'll end the segment talking about some very practical strategies for parents that I recommend not only for younger children, but we can use it for teenagers as well. And the metaphor I often give is it's driving a car. You know, I grew up on a farm, so I guess this is a public podcast here, so hopefully everyone's okay with that. But, you know, I grew up when I was probably 6 or 7. My parents taught me how to drive the garden tractor. So they drive it with me, but I learned some of those steps, right? Then a few years later, I could do that by myself. Then you learn how to drive the quad, tractors, and not on the public roads, but private roads, we're driving vehicles and learning all these different skills. So by the time I'm 14, I'm pretty good at being able to drive a vehicle and have my learner's license. The day I was 16, got my driver's and just loved it, right?
You got it because you prepared.
Exactly. And that's the thing, I think we can use that same metaphor of driving with our children. You know, you don't just give a 10-year-old the keys to the car and say, good luck.
Go.
Right? That could be a recipe for chaos. But there's so many steps in terms of driver's training, practice, supervision. We recognize that for something as important, as crucial as driving. And for our mental health and our emotional health, technology is one of those areas that is equally important in terms of safety and just stewarding that. So having these conversations with your children, like you said, Mel, even when they're younger, about, okay, here's how much tech time do you think would be appropriate, talk about why, and as they begin to, you know, have opportunities to go on online games and social media, I think, you know, having conversations at the beginning, here's some really positives about social media, it's a great way to connect with your friends, this is really positive, maybe starting with Messenger, just the safer things where they're only talking to people that they can know, understanding that side of things, and even sitting down with your child, especially when they first get social media, and saying, let's look at some of these conversations together.
Perfect.
How are you finding some of the posts, maybe just on Instagram from whoever that might be in their circles, or even direct messages? What was comfortable or uncomfortable about these messages? Oh, I really liked how you responded here. This is a great way of working through this. Actually, one of my colleagues who does work up here, he specializes in autism, I was actually super encouraged. I remember a few years ago, his daughters are graduated high school now, but they were in their early teens. And we were sitting for breakfast over in Fort McMurray downtown there, and he got a text, and his teenage daughter, I think she was 13, wanted to order a song on iTunes. And he said, did you read the lyrics? What a great question. So just reading the lyrics and having that child know and teen know what's the content of that song, what is the message, what is the takeaway.
That's right.
Is that something you want to be kind of thinking about and talking about and putting in your mind? And of course there's just sometimes fun songs on the radio that might not always be the most encouraging or age appropriate, so we don't have to be militant about it.
Right.
But just asking that question and helping our teens think critically about the information they're taking in, I think is just amazing. So wherever they're at in that journey, recognizing the more they can show responsibility in messaging friends or turning off their technology, having successful conversations, then they can continue to build that autonomy. Because technology is a privilege. Social media is a privilege.
It's a privilege.
For teens, they think, oh, no one else does this. All my friends can just message and no one monitors them and all these things. And you say, yes, absolutely, as a parent, that's my goal.
That's right.
I want to get to that place where I have 100% confidence in you.
That's right.
You can drive by yourself. I give you the keys to the car and know everything's going to be great.
That's right.
But I'm not going to give you the keys to my car at 14 and hope everything works out. There's a whole bunch of steps in place that we're taking. Driver's training, driving with a parent, building those steps in terms of social media to build that circle of responsibility so they can have more privileges.
And I'd even say to take it further, some parents may go, yeah, but when privacy comes into hand, how do I respect my child's privacy if I'm paying attention to their social media, I know their accounts? I would question about what you think your child can handle and what they cannot handle.
Exactly.
And so you're gauging how well they are doing with it by the responses when you talk to them about these subjects, right?
Yeah.
So if they are responding appropriately and you're able to monitor by seeing their Facebook account and seeing the messages, you know how they are. You know their maturity level to handle the next piece of privacy. However, I would say at the end of the day, when it comes to safety, parents have the absolute right to find out what's happening in their child's personal life and with regards to content and their social media. There are kids who will create different apps or different accounts and they put it under false names because they know mom and dad has access to this account but not to this account. So usually what happens at school, and mom and dad, I'm telling you this so you understand. Sometimes what happens at school is we'll get kids come in and they'll say, I have a screenshot of so-and-so sending this to me. And it will be a name that nobody recognizes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, how are we supposed to find out if this is inappropriate, if there's some bullying going on? The kids are masters at this.
Yes.
They know this in and out. So as parents, we have to learn to be a little bit more savvy ourselves so that we understand that we also have to be investigators.
So true.
We need to.
And having that conversation, I think that's a huge piece, is having that conversation with your child about what happens on the internet.
That's right.
And not creating fear around it.
Just awareness.
Awareness, because I know a lot of times when parents would come to me, it's more about, or teens come to me, it's more about, well, mom's going to take away my phone, or mom's going to take away my tablet. It should never be fear that way, because we want our kids coming to us. We want them to let us know when something has happened that's inappropriate online.
That's a very good point.
Because the internet, it can be scary. It can be great, but it can be very scary. And so having that relationship around technology, that we can talk about what happens online, and you're not going to be punished for that.
So true.
Because we want to have that conversation about safety and how to keep yourself safe. And if we're not having the conversation, then they're learning on their own. And I was a terrible driver, so if I had to learn on my own, my stepdad used to wear a helmet when we would drive around. So I wouldn't have been a good one on my own driving. And same thing with the internet. You need somebody to teach you about that. And if you don't know as a parent, do your research.
So
Find
true.
a friend or someone in your family that does know about it to help with those conversations.
So true. And as we wrap up the segment, it's just kind of understanding the goal as parents is not policing the internet, because that really creates the chasms, and your child feels they can't come to you. But it's teaching and coaching.
Yep.
One of my favorite NFL football coaches, the Super Bowl is coming up, so I had to throw this in here. Tony Dungy, he says, after he made some mistakes, his dad would always ask him, what can you do to make the situation better? And I think about internet use, it's all about learning and growing.
Yeah.
So we make mistakes. I've worked with a number of clients who've had some really unfortunate situations happen to them as teens. But working with them and their parents and saying, hey, this is a great learning opportunity.
Yeah.
You've learned so much through this. Thankfully, nothing significantly harmful came of it.
Right.
But you were able to take this opportunity to learn more about yourself, more about technology, how to make good choices, how to make good decisions. So I think if we can be with our children on that side of the table, working with them and saying, hey, this happened. Yeah, I've probably done that too, or made that mistake. Talking with them, not at them about it.
Yes.
Coaching and teaching, not policing.
Not shaming.
I think that goes a long way in building that bridge and connection of having meaningful conversations and being someone who's relevant in your child's life to actually talk and discuss about technology and how to cope with certain situations. Welcome back, and as we take the second segment of technology and technology use, we really want to dial into mental health and the impact of mental health for children, teens, and adults in terms of technology use and how to steward all that. So I know, Chantal, you're a great researcher and have so much knowledge in this, and Mel, look forward to hearing your thoughts too. Tell us a bit about mental health and how technology impacts things.
Oh, where to start?
There's a lot of things.
So much when you think about mental health and technology, and it's often not two that you put together.
True.
But I mean, I'm going to start with the most talked about, I guess, and that is aggression in video games.
Right.
I mean, this has been something that has been researched for years. For the last 30 years, this has been something that's been researched, and now, usually in psychology, we use correlation and linked and associated. There's actually been definitive statements that video game violence does increase aggression.
That's right.
Not
Period.
correlated, does.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say that if your child is playing a video game that they're going to all of a sudden become aggressive.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're more vulnerable to that aggression.
Totally.
Right? So we think about Psychology 101, the social learning theory, right? Where you had the Bobo doll, and if the child sees an adult hit the doll, they're more likely to hit the doll, right? That's just
It's
the way
modeling the behavior that they see. It becomes normative to them.
Absolutely. So you take seeing all the violence in the video games, and some of these video games are horrific, to be honest. Like, I don't have another word for it. And that's why there's ratings on these games. And I know it's not always easy to follow the ratings, and we think, oh, it's okay, like he can play this or she can play this because so and so plays it. But those ratings are there for a reason. So just being cautious of the fact that it can increase aggression and looking for those signs.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how do we practically steward that as parents? Because the reality is, Fortnite or Call of Duty or whatever else, I mean, it's the game every kid's playing these days or teenager. How do we support? I don't even know.
Because it's not realistic to say they're not going to act out, because they will. They are going to be heightened. They are going to be more escalated.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a conversation you have with your child, your teenager, and saying, okay, what level is acceptable?
Yeah.
And what is the level that maybe you need a break?
Totally.
And then you can kind of say that, and you're always within earshot to be able to pick up on those cues. And if you see your child is starting to get a little bit more amped up and getting more and more escalated, it'll be one of those conversations. Instead of saying, okay, shut it off right now, that's going to cause him or her to explode.
Yeah.
We don't want that. But maybe say, you know what, maybe 10 more minutes, and then let's have a break. And it should be a negotiation prior, so that in the moment you could say, what preferred activity do you want to do? You can do A, B, C, or D. So it's going to eventually make them go, as opposed to making them blow their lid.
And I'm a pretty sensitive person. This might be a little embarrassing, but I'll share it anyway. Like, there's certain video games that I just get a little creeped up with. Like, I enjoy playing some Call of Duty, playing with some friends, the zombies. It's a little scary sometimes.
Yes,
a little just like,
it's so lifelike.
As a 10-year-old, that might be a little much, right?
Right.
So I play with some friends and enjoy it, but, afterwards I just feel like sometimes you get some weird dreams or just all kinds of stuff. It can impact you in different ways. So I've personally experienced that, and it's a balance. I like hanging with my friends, I like playing some of those games, having some fun, but it's not something I want to do every day either.
No.
So I think it's just, like you said, Mel, it's having conversations around what your child can handle and is comfortable with too, probably.
And moderation, right?
Yeah.
So playing an hour video game a day, okay. Playing 4 to 6 hours after school and staying up till 11 and 12 at night when you have school the next morning.
Yes.
And then that's the other thing. It interrupts sleep and sleep patterns. And when we're sleep deprived, and I don't know about you guys, but I get cranky and irritable. And if I'm more prone to aggression because I play video games all night,
exactly,
then it impacts that more so, right? That window of tolerance. There's actually some research done that it blurs reality. When we play video games so long, it can actually blur our reality in the sense that we start to hear like something from the video game, but we're not actually playing.
I always dream about them after.
Well, that's processing, right? Your brain's going into overdrive trying to process all the information you took in.
So making sure that it's in moderation.
Well, I know sleep, it's probably not something that just affects children and teenagers.
Oh, no.
That one might be sometimes us adults on the screens before bed.
Exactly.
Facebook Marketplace or social media or this or that.
Scrolling.
Oh, and I told you guys before, I used to like to go home and decompress with Candy Crush. After I took the tech addiction certification, I deleted Candy Crush. Because I started to realize like how much I was actually playing it and why I was playing it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the important part. I was numbing. I was turning off my brain, and it got to the point when I would fall asleep at night, I could see the candy crushing like the lines. So
just like me, the dream.
Yeah. So it got to the point where I was like, this is not healthy, right? So I think that's the other thing. Recognizing healthy habits versus unhealthy. So bottom line, I deleted Candy Crush because that's the other part of our mental health. Is why are we using this tech? Are we using it to escape and to numb?
Yeah.
Because if we are, then we're not actually building that distress tolerance and those self-regulation skills. So we want to make sure that we're not using it for the wrong reasons, which a lot of times we are, which can lead to depression.
There we go.
More anxiety, which is a huge one right now. A few weeks ago, actually months ago now, there was a Facebook whistleblower. I'm not sure if you guys heard about her, but she had come out and kind of blown things wide open about the research that Facebook has done. And it clearly showed, specifically with teen girls, that it was impacting their mental health and thoughts of suicide. And they actually knew this, but refused to change their algorithm because it was generating profit. So they were literally putting money before mental health, and they knew.
And that's why this is really concerning, is for especially our youth, where they are so impressionable to all of these things, and a like to them, a like on Facebook or Snapchat or anything to do with any social media content, it feels like it's feeding their self-esteem. And as soon as they don't get that, they're not getting that immediate reward, which we know with video games, that immediate reward is why it feels like an addiction.
Yeah, feel-good chemicals.
Yes, those feel-good chemicals going through the brain, making us feel like, yes, I love it. As soon as those are gone, you get that low again. Yeah. And our youth, our children are in a stage where they're like, okay, I didn't get any likes, I didn't get any comments, I'm horrible, I'm not, no one likes me, and then that self-doubt creeps in. That's why anxiety and depression are higher. Totally. And again, the suicidal ideation, it would be good to bring up the fact that sometimes through social media and anonymity on social media, things are shared that are inappropriate and causes children to respond in a way that is negative and could potentially really compromise their mental health.
That's true.
So that is the reason why we have to screen it so much, is to determine what's safe, what is not. Because children do not understand it themselves. They don't have the ability to monitor it and screen it and have the amount that should be appropriate. As adults don't either. Some adults, they use too much screen time. So having that awareness and the impact on your brain and body is so important.
So
absolutely. True. And I think another important piece, the research has come out about, I'm picking on Facebook, but it's all social media, but Facebook has been around for a while, so there's been more research done. And there's actually what's called Facebook depression.
Yes.
So there's actually a correlation between people who have more friends on Facebook have greater rates of depression.
Interesting. How come?
Yeah. Because of the comparison effect.
Mm-hmm.
We're always comparing ourselves to so many more people.
Yes.
You think about years ago, we only had our immediate circles.
That's right.
And like
verbal praise.
Actors to compare ourselves to. Now we're comparing ourselves to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people on these social media platforms, and we're constantly getting that feedback that I'm not good enough, I'm not happy enough, look at that person's life, why can't I do it?
Yeah.
And this isn't only for teenagers. I have a lot of adults.
Oh, completely. Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to parenting, right? They're like, why is this family so happy and got it all together and I'm struggling?
Totally.
The reality is that that's a snapshot of one moment.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. The family photo? Yeah. What was happening before that?
That's right. Guaranteed it wasn't. Yeah, there's probably some stuff happening for sure.
Who got bribed? Right.
Right.
It's realistically. Like comparing other people's highlights to our lowlights.
Yes.
That's a good way of putting it.
We're not thinking about our highlights or these photos for ourselves. We're thinking of the lowlights. And
that's right.
Even just being real, right? It's like, wow, this person has 1,200 friends on Facebook. I only have 600 or whatever.
Yeah.
Or, I posted this thing about my kids and I got 50 likes, but the other person got 200. You just, right? All of us as parents,
Of course.
Adults, teens, we all kind of experience some of those
want validation
things.
At any age. It doesn't matter how old we are. We want validation. We want to know that people are listening to us, that we have a voice. And sometimes that is when we could get into these traps on social media, because sometimes we use that platform to air information, whether it be as a teenager, as an adult, or a child. And it could make you go down the rabbit hole of having some very difficult conversations.
You think about how susceptible we are as adults to this. So if you have a developing brain, someone who's still forming their identity, like that is a huge comparison to. And you're not only comparing yourself to people your own age. You're comparing yourself to people who are 10, 20 years older than you.
Or famous YouTubers or whatever else.
That 8-year-old kid that's making millions,
That's right.
I have a hard time not comparing myself to him sometimes. I'm like, why didn't I do that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a key thing, identity.
Yes.
Because I think we talk about as parents, we know the challenges, everyone's going to go on social media. We can't change that.
That's right.
But if we can really instill a strong identity in our children, even having these conversations, saying, hey, sometimes mama's looking at this or that, and it causes me to question too. And being real about our own struggles in a developmentally appropriate way as we engage and go on social media, and then really focusing on identity. Even for myself, it's like, I know what I'm about and who I want to be. So it doesn't matter what this Joe Schmo or whoever is on Facebook doing this, because I'm me and I want to focus on my life and what's important to me. So I think really building a solid sense of identity and strengths in our children is so powerful because it really equips them to be able to navigate social media, be true to themselves and what they're about, regardless of what's going on with other people.
I really love that, and I really love the fact that you're saying as a parent we need to model that. Totally. So that is the piece of it, is we're on our social media and we post a picture and we only have 5 likes, and express that to your child or your youth or whoever to say, yeah, sometimes I feel like I need the validation and I'm not getting it. So what do you think when you see this? And and then turning it back on them. When you have a picture on Facebook or you have a picture that you've put out there, how do you feel when you don't get a response? Like having those scenarios, like you said earlier with video games, it goes the same thing with social media. You need to have those scenario conversations. What happens if Susie posts this picture? How does that make you feel? Do you think about yourself and how that makes you feel within yourself? Those are the conversations you have to have. Otherwise, you're not teaching them the awareness to know how to cope and to form an opinion of self.
So true.
Right? Because they need to have an awareness first. So.
Yeah, I think as parents, we all do it. I've done it as a parent. We fall into the trap of telling our kids what to do or what they should think.
Yes.
But asking powerful questions.
Yeah.
It's literally the answer to every area of life.
It is.
Get the teenager thinking and answering some of these questions, because that's how they're going to grow in it. You can't police them.
No, exactly.
Teaching and coaching.
And you can't take it away, right?
No.
It's out there, and the reality is a lot of teenagers are on social media, and I can sit here and I can go through all the statistics and how horrible it is for our mental health. But the reality is, when I leave here, I'm still going to open up Facebook.
Yeah.
Like, I deleted Candy Crush. I'm still working on Facebook. But the reality is, right now, millennials are the loneliest generation.
They are.
I think, what was it? I put in my notes, 22% of millennials say they have no friends.
Wow.
Right.
Like, that's huge. Not even one friend that they could turn to.
That is so sad. And today, because of COVID and everything we're going through, a lot of their friends, the only friends they have are online, which is really sad, right? We're setting them up for feeling this way, this isolation that is happening with our youth and with our kids, which is really unfortunate. And I think I'd want to even say something along the lines of, when we're with our kids and we are not policing their social media, their video games, and they're seeing what's appropriate and what's not appropriate from you as an adult, I think it is important to recognize that, because a lot of parents will ask me, well, how do I take it away? Or I can't take it away,
Yes.
right? And then what? Because if you're not taking away their phone, they have access to all those apps.
Yeah.
Right? So again, that does go back to putting locks and blocks. That would help with some of the apps, but we all know our children are more savvy than us, and they'll figure it away.
Great.
And if they can't access it on their phone, they'll access it on their iPad, the computer, the school computer, their friend's computer.
Yeah.
They're going to figure it out, so it makes more sense to educate and inform them and teach them the structure so they'll want to stay within it.
So true.
It just makes more sense.
I did follow, again, on social media. There was this chain of a girl was tweeting. She was a teenage girl, but her mom would take away a device and she would log on a different device, and then a different device. It got to the point where she was logging on from her Wii and tweeting. Like,
Yes.
I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, but they
that
do.
shows how tech savvy kids actually are.
Yeah.
Right. I think one final note that I'd like to make about social media is, if you haven't already, I think you should watch The Social Dilemma.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
That is an absolutely fabulous documentary that talks about how these apps are formed, and the algorithms that are actually formed to be addictive, right? Yeah. And why it's addictive and how it negatively impacts mental health. But more so, it's the creators behind these apps. It's the people who invented the like button, right? That are talking about how they don't let their kids have social media.
Right.
They don't allow it in their household. So you have the people who actually develop this stuff saying, I don't allow my children to use it, right?
Which is really concerning, but it is true. Everything in moderation or limiting it completely. And you can't have this, but maybe you can have this instead, right? You don't have to block it all away. You don't have to throw it all and say, no, all technology is bad. But if even the creators are saying that, that's telling that it is impacting our children. It is impacting our adults.
Very true.
And interacting with our children. So we're speaking about it from a child's perspective, but as an adult. And we're sucked into social media, and our child is sitting beside us, and it's a perfect opportunity for connection, and we're missing out on that.
Totally.
Because we're so, going through our social media or whatever we're doing. It is important to recognize we also play a really big part in this. It's not just on our kids.
No.
Very
And we're all
true.
susceptible to it.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I think that's a really good segue into that addiction.
Yes.
Now, what you were
Exactly.
talking about, that validation, that can actually become an addiction because
Absolutely.
it stimulates that reward system in our brain.
So
And then
true.
you want it immediately. It's just like sugar or chocolate or some of those other bad ones.
Absolutely. We need it then. And so technology actually does create addiction.
It does.
So in the United States right now, there's actually 3 tech addiction centers
Okay.
to
Wow.
deal with tech addiction specifically.
Wow.
And have you ever seen the TV show Intervention?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So now there's actually a TV show where
intervention for that.
intervention for tech. So
Wow.
he goes into the
Wow.
homes, he watches the interaction between the parents, because I'm going to be really honest, some parents are terrified to
Yeah.
take away
They are.
their children's tech,
Yeah.
and it impacts the whole household.
Of course it does. They're
So
held hostage.
Yes, that's exactly what one of the parents had said. We're a hostage in our own home
Yeah.
because it had become an addiction.
Yeah.
So recognizing, again, going back to that brain, what is this tech and this screen time doing?
Yes.
And so recognizing it's that reward system, that instant gratification that we just wanted, that instant validation, which creates that dependency then.
And I think that's the biggest word there, dependency. You no longer can regulate on your own. You're dependent on other things to get either that reinforcement or that feedback. And that is what makes our children, or even us adults, feeling low, isolated, alone, feeling less than, because we're always dependent on this other tech piece to give us that feedback.
And in that course I took, it was talking about how we normally have things in our lives that will produce that hit of dopamine, that feel-good
Yeah.
adrenaline, that good feeling that we love. But what usually happens is we get a hit of it,
Yeah.
and then it subsides.
Yeah.
But when we're constantly connected to tech, we're getting hit after hit after
Right.
hit, and we constantly need that feel-good.
More.
And then anything that doesn't feel good, we just want it again, so then we flip back over to our tech.
Yeah.
That's why I had to get rid of Candy Crush,
Right.
right? Because I was like, oh, I don't want to. I had a long day. I just want to crush candy. No. I need to sit with that. I need to be able to sit with those feelings and not just push them away.
Yeah.
To learn to regulate.
That's right.
And I'm an adult.
Yeah.
So true. So how do we support teens or even adults too who might be facing or experiencing that right now?
Well, there's so many things that honesty and talking about it very openly about as an adult, as a parent. Yes, I have my own traps that I fall into with social media. So validating with your children that you as a parent can as well.
So true.
Some parents may say they don't deal with a lot of social media, they don't play video games, and that may be so. However, I would question and say, are there other forms that you're using, right? Like, are you in front of the TV and watching TV where you're just kind of that mind-numbing TV, or are you on iPads, or are you doing other things that could be tech related or involving tech? Kids need to know that you're normalizing it first
So
of all.
true.
If you start saying you can't do this, the first thing they're going to say is, Mom, Dad, you don't get it. You're not part of our generation. You're not going to get it. They're going to roll their eyes, which is a trigger in my house. That doesn't go over well. But that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
So you have to bring it down to their level saying, I get it. I'm that way too. Now what can we do about it? And maybe you could compromise with them. I promise I will do A, B, C, and D.
Right.
If you do A, B, C, and D.
Totally.
And let's talk in 2 days to talk about what we've learned from
Yeah,
it.
so good.
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback on that is that self-awareness,
Yeah.
right? Being able to talk about, and you kind of mentioned it briefly before, Joel, is how do I feel when I'm using this?
Yeah.
And having that conversation with your kid. How do you feel after 2 hours on social media or playing video games? Do you feel better or do you feel worse? Right? And just having that self-assessment, and that's something that, again, in counseling we build awareness,
Yeah,
right?
so true.
Because we can't change what we're not aware of.
That's right.
So building that awareness within your kid and yourself,
Right.
How am I feeling when I'm spending this time on Facebook? How am I feeling only comparing my lows to someone's highs, right? So helping kids build that self-assessment tool.
Which
So
would be
true.
really great if you even flip that. I'm just thinking out loud here. If you say to them, you spend some time doing some activity where you're connecting,
Yeah.
and then you say, How does that feel?
Totally.
What did you feel inside when you were connecting with mommy when we played this Monopoly game? Because not an online Monopoly game, but in person. And then you make the comparison. Now, when you were playing this game, how was it different? And then they could start making the comparison within themselves to that as well, right?
Yeah,
that's
so
another
good.
big one.
Yeah, providing some alternatives. I think, great journeys begin with small steps.
Yeah.
So wherever your teen's at, actually putting the ball in the teen's court, they probably don't want to change their video game habits too much. So, what will be the first step?
Yeah.
Maybe it's literally for 5 minutes a day playing some ping pong, shooting some hoops, doing an activity that's a little different for 5 minutes just with you connecting. But whatever it is, it's kind of starting small because sometimes it just seems like such a big thing. And as you shared from that show, feeling held hostage, how do we change these habits that have been ingrained, we've been practicing for a long time, even for ourselves as adults? I think starting small is really key.
I think that is fantastic, and it's attainable.
Yeah. Putting the ball in the child's court, the teenager's court, even now it's going and saying, what's one small step I want to work on this week?
Yeah.
So on that note, what's one small step the two of you want to dial in on?
Oh, I already know for me.
Media?
I already know for me.
Okay.
I spend a lot of time during the day on my phone because of the position I'm in.
Right.
I'm on my office line. I'm on my cell phone texting back. I have my emails up and I'm typing and I'm doing all these things at once.
Multitasking.
And it's great because I have a job that I have to multitask. However, when I get home, I turn my phone off and I leave it out of grasp because if it's too easy if it's sitting right beside me because again, I'm not Candy Crush, mindless, scrolling at Facebook, right? So now I leave it far away. Another thing is I deleted a lot of apps that were not something that I could learn something from.
Right.
But I kept my Wordscapes. Wordscapes stays on there, so I'm still stimulating my brain. So
go.
if I need to be on my phone, at least it's something a little bit more educational and not getting looped into that mind-numbing.
Well, I've deleted Candy Crush.
You've already shown us.
I've been
Good
strong.
There you go.
So that's kind of, but it's a weird feeling because I will pick up my phone and I will scroll to where it was on my home screen, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have it anymore.
Really? So something that says something about that. That's habitual.
Phantom Candy Crush.
Yes.
It's become so habitual, right? Like I
Yes.
just scroll through, and then I'm like holding my phone. I'm like, what am I doing?
Right.
Like I don't need this right now. Like,
Right.
but it's just such a habit. So so breaking that habit. So I've already done mine.
Good
now
job.
I just need to stay
Way to
strong.
go. Well, I've got a surprising one. I'll take it in a little different direction. I really actually, in a healthy way, appreciate technology as a way to relax in the evening. So if I don't take time to just listen to some relaxing music, do a bit of my own personal reading and reflection at night, I'm not very recharged the next day.
I think that's beautiful. I love it.
So for me, it's actually dialing into using technology more, quote, quote. My wife will love this one, by the way, because she does not like technology. But we have an understanding. She understands how I use it and why I use it. But just being able to put in some music in the background of my computer, doing a bit of reading on my phone, and really making sure I'm dialing into that every night is actually a really important part of my daily routine and how I plug in, how I recharge, and how I'm ready to go for the next day.
That is fantastic.
So having those healthy habits with technology.
It's not a bad thing. It can be a great thing that really helps us in our everyday life as well.
Not to mention, what are we doing right here? We're doing a podcast.
Yes.
We're using technology. It's going out over TV. It's going out through podcasts, through YouTube. There are good reasons to use this. And if it's for good instead of evil, then it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I want to talk about digital detox, though.
Please do.
Just wanted to hit on that one. What are the red flags that your child is becoming addicted to technology, or yourself, right? Once you start to notice those red flags, doing a digital detox. Now, like I said before, I've had parents that say, I'm scared to take away my child's Xbox or tablet. So that's where you do a backdoor detox.
Okay.
Tell us more.
Right? And learn this. Where you ask your kid, hey, how about we go out and we jump on the trampoline?
Good.
How about we get outside? How about you help me with this?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a backdoor of getting them away from technology.
Smart.
Right. You're suggesting something else.
And with camping season coming up, that is a great time to be tech-free and Wi-Fi free.
Yeah.
Because the long winters, we become more dependent on our devices.
Yeah.
And it is hard. So finding a way to do that digital detox in the summer and making sure that we're finding alternative activities. Like you said, playing a board game, helping with cooking, jumping on a trampoline. And kids will always use the excuse, but my friends play. And we kind of normalize it. Well, at least they're talking to their friends.
Right.
But we are social. We are social beings. And connecting online is not
the same.
connecting. So letting your kid know, even if they have a friend come over and play, that is still better than not having somebody with them, because it's not the same kind of social.
It's not. No. So you're setting it up, though. You said it's a detox, which means you're setting up things that you know they're still going to enjoy. You're not asking them to get rid of all of those things. You're spending time to actually find out the things that the person enjoys, so that you can replace the behavior with something else or replace the activity, which is important.
And I would just caution our parents to ask themselves, do you become kind of nervous about taking away your child's tech? And if the answer is yes, then it's time to do a digital detox. And whatever that looks like, it is recommended 4 to 6 weeks to kind of let that set in and build habits. But looking at those red flags, am I worried about taking away their tech? And if the answer is yes, start one. And if you don't know really how to do it, or you want more information, reach out. We are more than happy to help come up with an alternative plan, whether it's a strict digital detox or a backdoor detox.
So good. Thanks for sharing that, Chantal.
That's great.
And as you mentioned, feel free to reach out. We always welcome comments or questions or new ideas for our podcast. We're working on our spring menu of podcasts that we're going to be covering, so feel free chime in and connect with us, because we always appreciate your feedback and ideas and how we can continue to grow and improve our podcast too. So thanks so much for joining me, Mal and Chantal, today. Do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up?
The only thing I would say for a final thought is connection is everything.
Yeah.
And in-person connection is the best connection, no matter what it is, whether it's just sitting across a table looking eye to eye with your child. Just connect. Put the video games and tech aside and just spend some time getting to know your child.
That's beautiful. I mean, I can't top that. That is it. Find that time within a day to connect.
That's it. Period.
Use technology. It's a great tool. You can connect. Just like my daughter's doing the learning games, doing those different things. And remembering, I hope you heard today's conversation. Technology can be a wonderful tool, a great support. We're so thankful for it. And us as parents, we want to be able to support and use that effectively to help our children steward it. And there's also some challenges that we have to navigate and work through. But we hope today's episode has helped you just navigate your mental health and the mental health of your children too, because
your mental health matters.
Great job, team. See you next time.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Please reach out to us if you have questions or comments about today's topic, or questions or suggestions for future topics. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, we encourage you to reach out to local agencies for support, as our podcast is not a substitute for counseling. If you require immediate support, please contact the crisis line or your local hospital.